In our headlines on this Friday, May 8th, here in South Korea, a South Korean team is in the UAE to confirm the cause of an explosion and fire on a cargo carrier operated by South Korea in the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. and Iranian forces trade fire on Thursday amid their fragile ceasefire. And South Korea's current account remained in the black for 35 months in a row in March, with a record monthly surplus of over $37 billion, driven by information technology products. Meanwhile, the U.S. Court of International Trade rules illegal the Trump administration's 10% across-the-board tariffs in a second blow to its signature economic policy. A South Korean team is in the UAE to confirm the cause of a detonation and ensuing fire on a cargo carrier operated by South Korea in the Strait of Hormuz. Our Cho Young-eun reports.
A cargo vessel operated by South Korean shipping company HMM, damaged by an onboard explosion and fire near the Strait of Hormuz, arrived at Dry Docks World Dubai, the Middle East's largest ship repair facility, on Friday. According to HMM and local officials, the vessel was towed from waters near Al Quain in the United Arab Emirates and reached the Dubai port area shortly after midnight Thursday, roughly 12 hours after towing operations began. South Korean authorities are preparing to launch a full-scale investigation into the incident, with on-site inspections expected to begin as early as Friday afternoon. A South Korean government team comprising investigators from the Korean Maritime Safety Tribunal and forensic fire experts from the National Fire Agency is expected to conduct a probe. Investigators are looking into whether the explosion and fire were caused by an external attack, including the possibility of an Iranian involvement, or by an internal issue such as a mechanical defect aboard the vessel. The authorities said there have so far been no signs of hull damage consistent with a military strike, and the ship was reportedly neither listing nor taking on water following the incident. Meanwhile, a senior Iranian lawmaker denied Tehran's involvement during video talks on Thursday with South Korean lawmaker Kim Seok-gi. According to Kim, Iranian Parliament Committee Chairman Ibrahim Azizi said that if Iran had attacked a Korean vessel, the government or military would have officially announced it. South Korea's foreign ministry also declined to comment directly on Iranian media reports, saying establishing the facts and determining the exact cause of the incident remained the government's top priority. Cho Young-eun, Arirang News.
Staying in the Middle East, the U.S. and Iran traded fire on Thursday, with both sides blaming the other for the military confrontation. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
The U.S. military carried out airstrikes on Iran's Qeshm port and Bandar Abbas on Thursday local time, according to Fox News, citing a senior official. Iran's semi-official Mehr news agency had reported earlier that explosions were heard around Qeshm Island near the Strait of Hormuz and in Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. Iran, meanwhile, accused the U.S. of violating the ceasefire by targeting two ships. According to Iran's IRIB broadcaster, a spokesperson for Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters said Washington targeted two ships in the Strait of Hormuz and that enemy forces were hit by Iranian missile attacks and retreated.
Following these reports, an informed military official said that after the aggressive U.S. military targeted an Iranian oil tanker, hostile enemy units in the area of the Strait of Hormuz came under Iranian missile fire and, after sustaining damage, were forced to flee.
The fact that the two sides exchanged fire was confirmed, with U.S. Central Command saying that American forces intercepted unprovoked Iranian attacks and responded with self-defense strikes as U.S. Navy guided missile destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz toward the Gulf of Oman. In the statement, it said the U.S. eliminated inbound threats and targeted Iranian military facilities responsible for attacking U.S. forces, including missile and drone launch sites. It added that the Central Command does not seek escalation, but remains positioned and ready to protect American forces. U.S. President Donald Trump also confirmed the strikes on social media, saying that American destroyers were not damaged, but great damage was done to Iranian attackers. He told ABC News that the latest strike was just a light warning and that the ceasefire remains in effect. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Here in the local front, South Korea's current account remained in the black for 35 months in a row in March, with a record monthly surplus of over $37 billion. Our business correspondent Park Jun-han covers the latest numbers.
Korea's current account surplus reached a record high in March, fueled by a surge in exports of information technology products such as semiconductors and computer peripherals. According to preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Friday, the country's current account recorded a surplus of $37.33 billion in March. This is the largest monthly surplus ever recorded, which is up 289.7% year-on-year and 61% higher than February, which was the previous record monthly high. As a result, the account surplus in March recorded its 35th consecutive month in the black. The goods account alone posted a surplus of $35.07 billion as exports jumped nearly 57% compared to a year earlier to over $94 billion. The historic performance was almost entirely driven by a super rally in the information technology sector. Semiconductor exports skyrocketed by nearly 150%, while shipments of information and communication devices grew by 78.1%. Regionally, exports to Southeast Asia and China saw massive growth of over 60%. However, exports to the Middle East plunged by over 49% amid ongoing regional instability. While exports saw an unprecedented monthly high, the financial accounts signaled a major shift in investor sentiment. Foreign investors pulled a record $29.33 billion out of the Korean stock market in March. March's massive outflow came as foreign investors locked in profits from Korea's strong tech-driven rally. The selling pressure especially intensified as heightened geopolitical risks weighed on investor sentiment. As Korea's IT sector continues to dominate global semiconductor markets, the challenge remains for the economy to maintain this momentum while navigating volatile foreign investment and shifting global conditions. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a U.S. trade court on Thursday ruled illegal the Trump administration's 10% global tariffs. Now, these tariffs had gone into effect back in February after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled illegal the so-called Liberation Day tariffs. Our economics correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
A U.S. federal trade court has ruled that President Donald Trump exceeded his authority by imposing a 10% global tariff on imported goods. In a 2-1 decision issued on Thursday local time, the Court of International Trade invalidated the administration's use of Section 122 of the Trade Act and that it was not intended to address the types of trade deficits cited by Trump. The businesses argued the tariffs were an attempt to bypass a Supreme Court ruling that struck down Trump's 2025 tariffs imposed under emergency economic powers. The legal challenge follows months of friction over the administration's use of executive authority to bypass congressional oversight on trade policy. After the Supreme Court struck down an initial tariff round in February, the White House immediately invoked Section 122, citing a $1.2 trillion trade deficit recorded in 2024. Also, according to the Wall Street Journal, his latest ruling could set a significant precedent for more than 3,000 pending lawsuits seeking $166 billion in refunds for previously collected duties. While the trade court ordered the government to refund tariffs paid by the specific plaintiffs with interest, it declined to issue a nationwide injunction. This means the ruling does not provide immediate relief to all importers. In the meantime, the 10% tariffs are scheduled to expire in July anyway, at which point the White House plans to transition to Section 301 of the Trade Act to target what it describes as unfair trade practices and excess industrial capacity. Responding to the ruling, the Blue House said on Friday local time that Korea will continue to closely monitor related developments while seeking to maintain a balance of interests under its current tariff deal with the U.S. An official noted that the ruling currently applies only to specific plaintiffs and pointed out that Section 122 tariffs are limited by law to maximum of 150 days. The Trump administration is expected to appeal the decision. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The leaders of the U.S. and China are slated to sit down in Beijing late next week, and among the many issues on their agenda is that relate to a possible partnership on artificial intelligence. Our Ian Jin explains.
The leaders of the United States and China are set to meet next week. And according to the Wall Street Journal, citing people familiar with the matter, Washington and Beijing are weighing the launch of official discussions about artificial intelligence. This comes at a time when risks posed by AI are more threatening than ever. AI systems behaving unexpectedly, autonomous military systems, or even potential attacks from non-state actors using powerful open-source tools. Putting official discussions on AI on the summit agenda would call for the two countries to manage the strategic stability of the very technology that the two sides are in a race to outcompete. This would be the second time that the topic of AI discussions has reached the presidential level, following previous engagement between former President Joe Biden and Xi Jinping in November of 2023. Experts and former administration aides have pointed out that while discussions to establish an AI hotline for communication at the leadership level have great value, historically, China has not used the crisis channels that the two countries already maintain. Rather than an alliance, the U.S. and China would need to prioritize AI safety and stability. New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman said the Trump-Xi summit next week could be the most significant encounter between American and Chinese leaders since Richard Nixon met Mao Zedong in Beijing in 1972. The two countries were able to land a tacit alliance against the Soviet Union, a common foe, which now is artificial intelligence. Separately, on Thursday, former U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell was asked during a press meeting whether the upcoming summit would include efforts on North Korean issues, including the return of Trump's personal diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. Saying that it was a likely topic to be on the table, Campbell said Trump may ask Xi for suggestions on engaging with Kim. However, he also pointed out that the North's diplomatic and military standing has changed since the last Trump-Kim meeting, expressing skepticism as to whether Pyongyang would be interested in dialogue with Washington. Hyun Jin, Arirang News.
Come Saturday, that is May 9th, the European Union celebrates Europe Day for peace and solidarity within the continent. In light of this occasion, our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reached out to the EU ambassador to South Korea for his thoughts on broader partnership with Seoul. Do take a listen.
As global crises expose new vulnerabilities, South Korea and the European Union are building up a more resilient partnership.
This is the second energy crisis we are experiencing in the span of only a few years. The first one for Europe, it was in the wake of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Then we had to wean ourselves off oil and gas from Russia. But now, only a few years later, we see again our vulnerability vis-à-vis fossil fuel.
Speaking to Arirang News ahead of Europe Day, EU Ambassador to Korea Ugo Astuto said recent crises highlight the need to accelerate the transition toward greener and more resilient economies. A leading diplomatic advocate in Seoul for making the green transition, Astuto said Korea and Europe are already closely cooperating with their green and digital partnerships launched in 2023.
On the one hand, for instance, in the multilateral scene with the climate negotiation. And then bilaterally, focusing on some sectors that can be particularly promising. Let me mention batteries, where Korea is a major champion worldwide. Offshore wind, where the European Union can bring considerable expertise. Or the defining of the emission trading systems.
Economic security is another joint concern. Last month, the European Commissioner for Trade and Economic Security visited Seoul, launching a new strategic dialogue on trade, supply chains and technology.
We need to look at our vulnerabilities. We mentioned earlier energy. There are others, rare earth, just to mention one. And we need to look together how best to address these vulnerabilities, how to mitigate our dependencies, and how to foster our strategic autonomy.
This year marks the 76th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration, which laid the foundations for the EU after World War II, growing from 6 members in the 1950s to 27 countries and roughly 450 million people today.
The European Union is a project of peace. It's a project founded in respect for the rule of law, in respect for human rights, for international law, It's the fact that might does not make right. And these are principles which are all the more relevant today, at least as relevant today as they were in the 1950s, as we face a more and more erratic world scenario where we see a return to imperial wars in Europe emanating from Russia. So we need to make it clear again our belief in these principles and values which can work for the global common good.
Shared principles, he said, are drawing Korea and the EU closer together as like-minded democracies facing common challenges. He hopes to see a Korea-EU summit further expand the strategic partnership. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
Thank you very much.
The National Assembly has halted its plans to reintroduce its constitutional reform bill during Friday's plenary session for a vote. The halt comes in response to threats of a filibuster by the main opposition People Power Party. The Blue House, for its part, shared regret through a statement and urged lawmakers to continue efforts to bridge the gap over their differences. An earlier vote on the constitutional reform bill back on Thursday was declared invalid in the absence of a quorum as the PPP condemned the bill as rushed. The bill, however, is backed by 6 parties, including the ruling Democratic Party, and seeks to strengthen safeguards against martial law declarations. The leaders of South Korea and Canada discussed ways to deepen bilateral ties during talks on the phone on this Friday. According to senior Blue House spokesperson Kang Yoo-jung, President Lee Jae-myung expressed hopes for productive partnership in areas such as security and energy, and these hopes were shared by Prime Minister Mark Carney. They also agreed to work together to support a peaceful resolution to the situation in the Middle East and ensure freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. The call came as South Korea and Germany compete for a multi-billion-dollar submarine deal with Canada. The preferred bidder is expected to be announced next month. And President Lee Jae-myung marked Parents' Day on this Friday with solemn words of comfort to the parents of firefighters and police officers who lost their lives in the line of duty.
사랑하는 자식을 먼저 떠나보내야 했던 그 슬픔 앞에서 어떤 말로도 위로를 다할 수 없음을 잘 압니다. 마지막까지 소임을 다했을 그 젊은 청년들의 숭고한 희생을 무겁게 기억하겠습니다.
These words were shared during a related ceremony hosted by the Korean Senior Citizens Association earlier this morning. The President and First Lady Kim Hye-kyung also took time to engage in a gesture of gratitude common during Parents' Day here, that is the pinning of carnations on parents by their children. The Culture Ministry and the Korean Film Council will distribute over 2 million coupons that offer a discount of 6,000 won off movie tickets. The coupons will be available from next Wednesday, that is May 13th. They can be used at major cinema chains, including CGV, Lotte Cinema, Megabox and CineQ, with up to 2 coupons per person through each movie theater's app or website. And on designated Culture Day, Wednesdays, movie tickets could cost as low as 4,000 won. A second distribution of such movie coupons will take place in July. Be careful what you wish for. These are the words of wisdom that come to mind when watching the latest K-horror series on Netflix, If Wishes Could Kill, which has been receiving rave reviews. Our culture correspondent Park Konu had the pleasure of sitting down with one of the lead actors.
A wish granted, but at the cost of your life. That's the chilling premise behind Netflix's latest Korean horror hit Kirigo, or If Wishes Could Kill, which climbed to the top of the platform's global non-English TV chart the second week after release.
우선 기리고가 지금 넷플릭스 1위를 차지했는데요. 먼저 너무 축하드리고요. 1위를 딱 처음 하셨을 때 어떤 기분이셨나요?
When I woke up, my phone was flooded with congratulatory messages. I felt incredibly happy and thought to myself, wow, so this is what this kind of feeling is like.
One of the standout factors behind the series' success is its cast, which is largely made up of rising actors, including Hyun Woo-seok. Hard work behind the scenes became one of the driving forces behind the show's popularity.
Since this was such a major production, I initially felt huge pressure, but was able to overcome it thanks to the support of my fellow actors and the staff. I even arrived early on set to study coding with my teacher, which helped make my performance more convincing.
One critic said the appeal of new faces may have resonated even more strongly because the series was released on a streaming platform.
The new faces helped maintain viewer immersion, while the strong storytelling kept audiences engaged. Unlike theaters, streaming series rely less on star power and more on the quality of the story and acting.
Insiders also say the uniquely Korean horror elements have resonated with global audiences.
Factors like shamans gave the series its own distinct identity, and I think that became one of its biggest strengths. Of course, horror is about fear and jump scares, but beyond that, viewers also connected with the characters' relationships and chemistry.
The series combines traditional Korean shamanism with modern digital devices to create fear in a very contemporary way. The idea of making wishes through a smartphone app in exchange for death feels both like a survival game and a modern take on exorcism, which appears to be resonating strongly with overseas viewers.
The critic added that the future of K-horror lies not only in jump scares, but in compelling storytelling and detailed world building. And judging by the global response so far, audiences around the world may already wish for what Korean horror has to offer next, even a season 2 for Kirigo. 박건우, Arirang News.
Clear skies have returned to most parts of the country. Temperatures will stay slightly below seasonal averages through tomorrow. But on Sunday, winds will shift from northwesterlies to warmer southwesterlies, pushing Seoul up to 25 degrees Celsius, bringing early summer-like weather. Under the clear skies, UV levels will be very high in many areas during the daytime. So it's best to limit outdoor activities, but if you're planning to head outside, be sure to put sunscreen on. Meanwhile, strong winds are expected in parts of central and southern areas and Jeju Island, and parts of Daegu and Gyeongsang-Bukdo province will remain dry. As for temperatures, Seoul will start the day at 10 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 8 degrees, Gwangju at 6 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 22 degrees, Daejeon, Daegu, and Gyeongju will all top out at 24 degrees. Looking ahead, rain is expected on Monday across central regions, as well as parts of Jeollabukdo and Gyeongsang-Bukdo provinces.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon consumption trends. Do stay with us.